Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So I'm Richard Anderson, and I'm going to be presenting with Fred Vidian as well. So what we're going to do is to talk about current work that we're doing with Conference XP in offering a tutored video instruction course. So this is a course that we're currently offering between University of Washington in Seattle and Beihang University in Beijing. So this course we're offering by tutored video instruction, meaning lectures are recorded at University of Washington. They're shown in a tape-delayed fashion in Beijing. So 3 or 4 days after I lecture, they're shown in Beijing with teaching assistants facilitating. That I'm going to be talking about the tutored video instruction and the classroom interaction, and then I'll hand off to Fred to talk about the supporting technology. That our interest was to see, can we offer this course in Beihang? And the basic motivation was to offer a course that couldn't be offered easily at this university in China. That even the top universities in China face a challenge of having expert instructors available for the courses. That I was approached initially by Harry Shum from Microsoft Research Asia about the idea of going over to Beihang and spending a semester there. That there were a number of reasons why this wouldn't have been possible. Basically, a wife and 2 children that would have made it very difficult for me to go off and spend 3 months in China giving the course. So while they were visiting, I pitched the idea of using tutored video instruction for the course. And so the model would be that we would base it on the UW course, but offer it in China. So the first practical thing that came up was just fitting it between the UW term and the Beihang semester, which actually aligned perfectly. It was a course I was scheduled to teach, so it could just fit in to start a little bit later in the semester. That in our initial discussions that I was talking about Conference XP and talking about our 4-way video conferences, and they said, this is fantastic. Let's take the UW course, do it live in China. And then I pointed out the live UW course is 1:30 to 2:30 in the afternoon. And with a 9-hour time shift, that would be 4:30 in the morning in China. And so it was a measure that they wanted the course, but they didn't want it enough for a 4:30 offering. And the UW course being a regular undergraduate course, it would take essentially an act of the governor to shift its offering time. That actually there is a sweet spot for West Coast schools for offering live courses with China. So we do have a master's program offering courses in the evening, where the courses are 6:30 to 9:30 in the evening, which would translate to a 9:30 in the morning course in China. So there is a sweet spot for the West Coast with morning courses or with evening courses corresponding to Asia in the morning, but this was not one where it would work. So this brought about the idea of doing it tutored video instruction. The tutored video instruction is an idea that's been around for a long time. That in the late 70s, Gibbons from Stanford promoted tutored video instruction and did a long series of studies. And in his studies, he was able to come up with very, very convincing evidence that under the right circumstances, tutored video instruction worked very well. In fact, he was able to show not only did the remote students who had tutored video instruction outperform students who were watching videos alone for instruction, he also was established that the tutored video instruction students outperformed the Stanford University students at the time. So there's a set of very positive evidence on tutored video instruction when it's done well, that the idea materials are recorded from a live class. Part of the theory is that you do want the live class dynamics for this. So you do want to have an instructor filmed when the instructor is interacting with an audience. So there are kind of the natural places where an instructor would be setting up for audience interaction or raising questions for the audience. And then what the facilitator does is the facilitator will stop the video materials to allow discussion from the audience. So the model, we're using recorded materials. They're being shown in a small group setting. And a big part of the learning that takes place in the group setting is from interaction between the students and interaction between the student and the facilitator. This is the view that the Beihang students will have of my lecture. So we're recording this live in class, that I lecture to a class of about 40 students at University of Washington, that I am lecturing from a podium with a relatively fixed position. I am lecturing from PowerPoint slides or slides that started out as PowerPoint using classroom presenters, so I am able to ink actively on the slides. That we're using Conference XP for capture. This is the web viewer tool that Fred created for replay of our lectures that we've repurposed for replay in the tutored video setting. So this is ongoing right now. The Beihang University students are using the same course materials as the UW students, same homework assignments. They're going to be taking the same exams as the UW students. So we'll at least have some basis for comparison in how the students are doing based on midterm and final exam performance. That I visited in September to set up the course. I met with the teaching assistants. I met with all of the students. I'm going back next week to see how the courses are going and meet with the students. Please, Gina.
Just a quick question, if you wouldn't mind, Richard. What is the delay or the lag between when you do your presentation / class and when the students in Beijing see?
It's currently about 10 days. That their class was actually delayed in the start because there's a week-long Chinese holiday at the start of October. So their class didn't start until then. That I would actually prefer it if there was less of a lag between my offering and them using the lecture materials. Because what happened 4 or 5 lectures ago at UW, for me, is completely lost history. So in addition to using Conference XP, that we're also using the classroom presenter technology to support classroom interaction. That this is something I've talked about previously, I think, at this gathering last year. That the idea is that we want to increase interaction in a classroom, and the model of allowing students to participate from their tablet PCs, work on that I will have my slides available on all of the students' machines. I can distribute exercises to the students, and then the students can send their responses back, and I can integrate it into the class. So just to show a schematic of how the system works, that these are the 2 desktop displays. I've put up an exercise, draw a picture of yourselves. So a pair of the students have sent in their responses to me. So I collect all of the student responses. I can view the responses and look at them, decide what they're coming in. So I've picked Todd's response, and I can say, oh, Todd believes that he's a blue square, and I can talk about this response, I can move to another response and say, oh, and look at Jason's response. Jason thinks he's a red circle. So I'm able to take responses from the audience and integrate them into my classroom discussion. This is something that I'm using in the UW class. This is something I'd be using in the UW class even if I wasn't running it as a binational course. That at University of Washington, what I do is about once a week I distribute tablet PCs. And so 1 out of 3 of my lectures will have a collection of embedded activities that I use in the lecture. These activities are used for a whole set of different things that I want to do in the classroom, of promoting engagement, so giving people activities periodically just to engage them, collect different ideas, promote peer interaction, get assessment of what students do or don't understand. So there's a lot of different goals that are used in these activities, and various different instructors who have been using these, Gino included, have developed different types of pedagogy based upon classroom interaction. So this is something that I do in my UW class, and I decided in doing the tutored video instruction class, I wanted to reproduce the student activities based on Classroom Presenter. So the way that we integrate the classroom activities in the remote sites is that we had a number of tablet PCs made available to the students in the Beihang class as well. So in the lecture, when there's an activity presented by the instructor, at that point, the facilitator can just stop the video materials. The students in the Beihang class would do the classroom activity, send it back to the facilitator, and then the facilitator would be able to display the individual results that come in. So that would essentially reproduce the discussion that I had done at the UW class, but with the Beihang students and the Beihang facilitator running it. So just giving examples of the types of activities that come up, that this is a senior level algorithms class that I'm teaching. So when I'm talking about topological sorting, I give students a graph and just ask them to compute a topological sort. Network flow, having students compute a minimum cut. So teaching algorithms, I find it's very, very important to be able to give students examples and have class involve students doing some work and doing some thinking during class. It's a pedagogy I find quite effective in algorithms. That here are a pair of submissions from the class in China, that examples that after class is over in China, that they send back all of the submissions to me. So after the fact, I get to review what happened in the class. Of course, there's a certain risk in me displaying these because I have no idea what's written on Chinese here. So it could be, this is the most boring educational experience I have ever had. Yeah.
You would know. Yeah. It's not saying that I know, I can read. It's not saying that it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, so if no one could read, there was no risk. That the risk is the middle situation where some people can and some people can't. That one of the things that I was very curious about in offering this class in China is what the communication language would be in the classroom. That I didn't have any real concern about the students being able to understand my English lectures. The students, by the time they're at the university, they've been studying English for 10 years. So at least on the listening and understanding spoken and written English, that they're going to be very strong. That talking with the students in China, that I was very, very interested to find out what their favorite television show was. So take a guess that for Chinese college students, what's their favorite television show? So Friends was actually one of the 3 shows that were mentioned. Guesses on the other 2?
Saturday Night Live.
Not Saturday Night Live.
Everybody loves it, right?
Not Survivor. So the other 2 were 24 and
Prison Break.
and Prison Break was the dominant one.
Really?
So I was talking to a student, and he said, he wasn't really that interested in school. He really just wanted to go home and watch Prison Break. So they're getting this from the internet, so they're seeing the same episodes we are. And I don't know what we should think of the nation of China developing their understanding of our culture based on Prison Break. Okay, so what we're trying to do in offering this class is that I try to teach a fairly interactive algorithms class at University of Washington. So by having the classroom activities, I draw people in. I also do stop frequently, and I ask the students questions, solicit a lot of input. And one of my goals in setting this up is to try to reproduce this classroom atmosphere in the remote session. So my lecture materials are designed around interaction. That one of the things that's turning out to be very time-consuming for this course is that after I give a lecture at University of Washington, I am going through the lecture, watching my own lecture, providing a set of facilitator notes of identifying places where it's recommended that they stop for interaction. I'm trying to decipher a set of the students' questions that are asked during class to identify which ones they should worry about, which ones they shouldn't.
For your class at UW, we'll put Chinese experience aside for a moment. If you have that kind of interactivity, which I think is great, how many, when you got 40 plus students, how many submissions are you dealing with in that pane that you have on the left there?
So one thing I've discovered is very, very effective is it's better to have students sharing tablet PCs than working together. So I would much rather have 3 students per tablet PC than 1 student per tablet PC. And even though I have enough tablets in my back room to pass them out to everybody, I much rather have people share because it does create in-class collaboration. So that cuts things down. While people are doing the activities, I actually walk around the class so I can see what people are doing. So by the time the things are coming in, I've been able to pre-process and understand the information that I'm getting. That the other thing that comes up is that if it's a complicated submission, for example, yesterday I had people do some programming, write out some programs. What I would do is I would pick one without really understanding it and then display it to the students and then work through with the students and kind of decipher it at that point.
So I am going to give you a quick walk through the technology that we've used to implement this class. And before I begin, I want to stress that all the stuff that we use is on our website and available if you're interested in trying to do an exercise like this yourself. Hopefully our documentation is even good enough for you to be able to do it without a whole lot of headaches. But if you do get into it and want to know any more information, don't hesitate to contact me about it. So this is the overview of my section of the talk. Basically, I'm just going to give you a little bit of historical background, kind of where we're coming from with Conference XP, then the 3 phases of the production, if you will, the recording heavily based on Conference XP Archive Service, the lecture preparation, focusing on the archive transcoder tool, and then the playback phase using the web viewer. So let's see. So we've been doing distance learning with Microsoft for quite a long time, and we were involved with Conference XP from pretty much day one. So it was natural for us to try to be an early adopter with Conference XP in our professional master's program. We did our first deployment in 2002. It was okay, but not perfect, and it steadily got better from there.
You're painting a very favorable picture of it. When Jay Beavers and I talked about the first offering of our course, the title we chose was How to Fail at Video Conferencing.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a step backward from the previous technology, which I will not name. In our distance learning program, we had a tradition of providing lecture archive materials on the web. So we felt that when we moved to Conference XP, we sort of had to continue this archiving activity. So that was one of the reasons why we focused some attention on building the archiving and archiving playback into scenarios where maybe it's not a super high bandwidth network. We made this a focus of our work in Conference XP extensions. So the having a dedicated classroom, I just wanted to briefly stress the value of this. So we have the benefit of a nice new building with a room which is pretty much used for our distance learning activities as well as some development and testing. So just the scheduling benefit there is huge. And also the fact that for a class like this, we can, there's essentially no setup teardown involved. It's literally 3 on switches and a login, and we're pretty much ready to go. So I think that having this, these kinds of facilities built and ready to use really, really lowers the barriers to doing this kind of work. And then, of course, we have all this local expertise with Classroom Presenter, which has been invaluable. Yes?
This may be only a sort of related question, but if you have these things all pre-installed, do you have a sort of campus-wide authentication system they're tied into?
No. Well, so we basically just use our department's Windows domain for basic, the authentication. But when we were talking a little bit about adding security and access controls on top of Conference XP, but that's definitely something we'd be interested in for the future. So let's see. So into in the recording phase of the materials for this class, I think you probably all will recognize this diagram. Really the only thing that's missing is, from our distance learning scenario, is the remote classroom. So the fact that we can use the Conference XP RTP networking and the archive service just makes recording the classes so easy. So I wanted to just use the tablet, since I've got it, to recap kind of what the interactions are here. So we have the classroom instructor, sending slides, ink, out here, being picked up here, and then the archive service, of course, listens in. The audio and video, I'll do that in red. Really nobody cares about that except for the archive service. Okay, and then the student activity results, which I'll do in black, come here, of course, and then the archive service gets it as well. And at the end of the class, we've got a complete record of all the stuff that happened in class. Okay, this is kind of old news. So moving on to the post-production phase. So this focuses on a tool which was my 2005 CXP RFP project called Archive Transcoder. And this has already been mentioned today, I know. So I was just curious if I could get a brief show of hands of who is sort of at least vaguely familiar with Archive Transcoder. Okay, so we've got a handful of people. All right. So the basic feature here is that Archive Transcoder is going to take a set of streams from your archive service database and make a WMV. So that's kind of where it starts. But then there are a few more things that are added on that turn out to be important for this scenario. So just to go over a few bullet points, I know Jason loves bullets. So we'll use some bullet points here, and so we can transcode to different Windows Media Profiles if we choose. We can also pull the data out in the native Conference XP format, which is much quicker, but has a few limitations, such as when you mix the audio, you kind of still need to decode it and then mix it and then recode it. But you can kind of forget about it as a minor detail. A little bit of AV editing functionality. We focus our efforts on transcoding or transforming presentation data to target the WebViewer app. Now, what's going on here, the reasons for that are that we need to, for one thing, over time, these presentation applications change, the format of the data changes. We still need to kind of keep backward compatibility and, as much as possible, forward compatibility with the old archives and the latest player. Okay, so the player, I kind of don't like to change the data format that the player understands, and so all the changes can happen in the transcoding. I don't mind updating the transcoder code to understand the latest classroom presenter, for instance. So that's one of the reasons. Plus, there's also just a lot of redundant data sent out on the wire in one of these presentations, and you can really streamline the data set a lot if you focus on the fact that really the only thing you care about is an archive playback. So, for instance, a slide transition is a very, very small amount of data, which in the old classroom presenter, there was a lot of concern about, people who joined in late. They needed to be able to get the current slide information, so that information kept being rebroadcast. So we can trim out a lot of that redundancy. In the end, what we come out with is a downloadable package. We just kind of wanted to make this be a self-sufficient setup in the Beihang campus. It wouldn't depend on having an actual network that works there, although I'm sure the network is great. We can also target streaming scenarios, though. And of course, you can grab these tools off our website. So before I give you a quick walkthrough, so this here is the main screen of archive transcoders. You have sort of the top level things like the job title. This here, which you can barely see, is this is a list of what I call job segments. So basically, this is how the simple editing paradigm is implemented. A segment is just one continuous time period, and we can stitch together multiple of these in order to do simple cuts and crops and joins. So in this case, we have only one. And this thing here is the dialog that pops up when you say edit a segment, okay, or create a segment. Now this stuff here is just a simple representation of the archive service database. So you have things like conferences. Within conferences, you have participants. Within participants, you have streams. So you have audio, video streams. You have presentation streams. The different kinds of video streams, such as the screen scraping capability, are supported. So by double-clicking the streams, they end up over on the right side of the dialog here. And so this defines kind of a set of audio streams here, one video stream here, one presentation stream per segment. Okay, so then the other thing that's important that we do here is define the time range for the segment. So to do that, it's much easier if we click on Audio Video Preview, and then you get a little dialog with the Windows Media Player in it, and you can build a preview and actually just click the button when you want it to cut in, and click the button when you want it to cut out. So that part is very simple to do that way. Okay, and then when that's, oh, go ahead, Ivan.
This is an interesting way to do the transcoding, but one thing I've wondered before your system, back when we did some of ours, was if it wouldn't be somehow easier to take the RTP stream and basically back out the payload data into a big file. It's just a big JPEG movie file or a series of JPEG images or H.261 data or whatever, and then load it into sort of a standard off-the-shelf consumer post-production tool.
So are you saying if the RTP stream were not, as it is currently, Windows Media format?
Looks like
if you wanted to send a MJPEG or something like that instead of Windows Media Stream, is that the question?
You might be able to take the raw data and make it look like a movie input file or an audio file that you
so the raw data is just compressed, right. Windows Media compressed stuff, and really the only thing that it's missing off the wire is a header information. Okay. And in fact, so let me just jump back here and erase my ink. So one of the, you cannot read this, but it says Windows Media Target Profile. One of the selections here, it's a little combo box, is no recompression. So what that's really doing is just taking the data straight out of the database, samples as they are, putting a header on the file, and then just blowing out however much you said you wanted. So it's kind of the same thing that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think it's doing what
yeah.
That's cool.
Okay, so on to the playback phase. Now this has kind of already been discussed, and in fact it's not super... Good.
Is there a chance that you could just use Windows Media Player as the viewer? I mean, is this a real-time
translation so
you could use?
The output is... Okay, so the question is, can we just use Windows Media Player as the viewer? Absolutely. So the reason to use Web Viewer is if you have Classroom Presenter slides and ink associated with the conference. Otherwise, really, there's no reason to use anything other than Windows Media Player. It's really just the WMV otherwise. And I'm glad you asked that question because it triggered, I intended to mention this checkbox here, which does kind of a little-known feature. Basically, it says create video from presentation. So what's happening here is instead of this video, it would be just the slides in ink that are being sampled 30 times a second, and that would become the video. So this is kind of the idea is to target devices where like the PDA or something, smartphone or something like that, that can play a Windows Media file, and the idea being that for people on the move with a PDA, the more important thing to see on the video is the presentation instead of the talking head. So moving right along. So this just implements the integrated playback, synchronized, consumes data as prepared by Archive Transcoder. Also available for you to download, binary and source, have your way with it. You've seen this picture already. So table of contents here, click on entries to move around. You can also use the slider.
Quick question. Does this work on Windows Media Player 11 as well? Or is this...
I don't think so, although I haven't tried it.
What was the question?
Does this work with Windows Media Player 11?
So 11 just got released on Monday, and we downloaded it, and it works with Conference XP, and it's worked with all the embedded stuff that I've had a chance to test.
Okay.
So I don't know any reason this wouldn't, but it's
So-
trivial to test and find out.
Yeah, I think the Windows Media Player 11 was causing some problems with the transcoder.
The beta was.
They fixed some problems
They
then?
fixed we found some problems in it with Conference
Ah,
XP
great.
as well.
Okay.
So there's a good
I'll make a
good
note to
chance
try that
will
again.
work correctly.
Good, thanks. So I think that's my last slide. Are there other questions about the technology part before I hand it back to Richard? Okay.
So I just wanted to finish up with a couple slides getting back to the Beihang class. That first of all, just to emphasize the course is in progress right now. So we are hearing favorable things from the class, although my feeling is even if it wasn't going well, we would still be hearing favorable things from the class. So I'll be visiting next week to get a firsthand impression that we are collecting quite a bit of data of having observers, being able to see all of the artifacts from students, that giving the teaching assistants worksheets to fill out to record when there are verbal interactions in class. So we are going to be able to do a reasonable evaluation of what's happening in this class. And also, with the students taking the same midterm and final as UW, we'll be able to look at performance-based measures as well. So the technology has been working quite well in the Beihang class, that with a few glitches in the newest version of Classroom Presenter, that the biggest technical problem we're facing is with the audio. So we're recording it in the UW class, and the instructor audio is captured with a close talking microphone, so that's very high quality. That for the audience audio, we've got various ceiling mics throughout the class, which if people are sitting in the right way and speaking clearly and facing the right direction are very clear. They can also be, some students are going to be very hard to hear. The strangest thing that I've observed in watching the video is that when I go to class, I don't notice any students coughing. But when I replay the video, it's just a stream of students coughing. So this is very much the discussion that Fred was raising about the multiple audio streams. And if we were able to handle the student audio stream separately from the instructor audio stream, that would be a help. That WebViewer is what we're using for replay at the Beihang class. There's work to be done in developing a more appropriate tutored video instruction replay tool, which would integrate both kind of the presenter inking with the replay tool. That what we're doing right now is running both presenter and the web viewer on the same machine, and then alt-tabbing between the two to run both applications. So there's an integration opportunity. That the other thing that I've already mentioned is the lecture review process by the UW instructor, by me, has been quite time-consuming, and I can see that there's opportunity for tool support for lecture review and annotation with this scenario in mind. So just to finish up, information from the course is available at the course website, and feel free to contact me or Fred for questions about this work.
I just want to add a little bit to what Richard started talking about. Wait, in the fall semester of 2005, was an instructor, Richard Rogers, on our campus who used basically the same thing that you just heard with 52 students, each student with a tablet in a wireless environment. And it was pretty damn amazing that everything worked as advertised with very few glitches. So it's a robust process that you go through?
So I think when Richard Rogers did his class, that holds the world record for device deployment in the classroom.
And it worked as advertised.
Okay, thanks.
The second is, my name is Bob Riddle. I am not with Internet 2.
You are too.
Some of you may know me from Internet 2. I wandered off there 8 years ago for a 2-year appointment, and after 8 years decided to go back to campus. And so I've secretly been a U of M staff member all these years, and now I can officially announce that I'm a U of M staff member because I've gone back to campus. And I've been invited to participate in a group called Enabling Technologies at the U of M Medical School. And just to give you a quick background of where Conference XP might fit in the training of doctors or medical research, one of the executive administrative associate dean, I don't get all these titles at the medical school. That means he's close to being the dean, but he's not, except the dean's retired, and now he's the acting interim dean, so he really is. So, but he had this notion where his concern is that what I heard him say is that basically they've been training doctors the same way for the last 100 years, where they watch a surgery, they watch one, they do one, and then they teach one. And you've watched enough medical shows to believe that that's not true, and all disease can be fixed in an hour or half an hour, depending on how many commercials there are. It turns out that at the medical school, they really do watch one, do one, and teach one. And so he was interested in understanding how he might be able to take some of the technology that's available today, and when a medical student after their 4th year emerged from medical school, that they were better prepared to be a doctor. I've learned things that I didn't need to know, like most surgeons within their first 31 operations make one of the two most serious errors they'll make in their whole career. That's right, get a doctor with gray hair. But the point is, what if they can do their first 30 surgeries in some virtual, immersive environment and make their mistakes there on a patient that just needs to be rebooted to recover from the blue screen or something like that? And so that's the point of the whole Enabling Technologies group. I report to the dean's office. Don't ask me to explain this. And the goal is to use the available technology to improve the educational process and provide more potential for medical students to learn and practice on virtual beings that aren't related to you. Okay, so and so I'm interested. Jonathan won't tell anybody at Internet 2 this, but I've worked on network plumbing long enough where I want to go back to being I'm interested in what comes out the end of the pipe and what you can do at either end of the network plumbing. And so this was an opportunity to go back and to work. The value proposition was clear to me. So anyhow, so let me tell you what is going on at the medical school since I've been hanging out there and areas where it intersects with Conference XP. One is in the area of distance learning. There is one of the faculty members at the medical school wants to, in the winter semester, is going to conduct a course for medical students both at the University of Michigan and at the University of Iowa, where he and a colleague there are going to work together with these classes. And so it's sort of this collaborative, distant education environment. And things that I've learned that are more important on a medical campus than they are on sort of the School of Engineering campus and places like that. Time matters more to doctors and the medical faculty than any faculty members I've seen on campus. I mean, they're They're either on their way to class or on their way to the hospital rounds or on their way to their research lab. And they do not have much patience for technology that doesn't work the right way every time. My observation about collaborative environments is either people get, you either have the people using the gear and they're techies and they're more interested in taking the box off the computer and looking at the wires and sniffing the packets, or there are folks, and I think perhaps the medical faculty are on the other end, is if they push a button and it doesn't work, they're done. And the folks at the medical school and the doctors on the medical campus are like that. So the environment I find myself in is one that I should have a Microsoft shirt, because on the medical campus they distribute Windows on every platform. Because they know what's there, they can pre-build them, they know that the stuff that they're going to put on those laptops, on their desktop computers, behavior can be predicted and expected. So one of the things that changed for me when I wandered off from Internet 2, where looking at collaborative tools that needed to run across the multiple different types of platforms, that is not a problem for me on a medical campus. If it will run on a Windows platform, I have fulfilled the requirements for the community that I'm serving these days. So turns out that's pretty true at the medical campus in Iowa as well. So the notion that you would tell folks at either end, the IT folks at either end, that they need to put an application on a Windows platform, they don't even blink, because that's what they do. And they do it very well. So anyhow, that's one thing, distance education. In the winter term, we're talking to Dr. Gruppen about using Conference XP to do this. One of the other things that has become interesting in the medical, at the medical school, is it turns out that if you're an M1 or M2 medical student, you don't spend much time playing Nintendo and such, because guess what's the most precious commodity you have? Time. And so they have discovered doing things like podcasts. We actually, with Fred's help, we were able to take the Conference XP output and create a podcast for that, for these video iPods. And it turns out that on the medical campus, lots of students have these iPods and video iPods, not to listen to music, to take course material that's been captured. And the professors, particularly the professor of anatomy that I've talked to about this, really likes this a lot, because instead of kids the students spending all their time scribbling down things that they know they're going to need to know, they actually interact and ask questions that are worth knowing, because later on they can go take their notes in a more casual fashion later on. So we've done a podcast experiment using some of Fred's code, and it worked well. So that's one of the things we're doing. The other is this thing called persistent presence, and we're actually looking at using DVTS and or Conference XP for this. The faculty at the medical school spend most of their life walking around from their office over to their lab, over to a classroom, over to the hospital, etc., etc. We're working with one of the faculty members, David States, who needs to spend some time in his office. He has two labs. He has one which doesn't look like a lab in a medical complex. It looks like a room where you put a bunch of programmers and tell them to go work. A bunch of students there working on computers. Then there's the wet lab, which is over in the Medical Science 1 building, where he has some lab techs there that are actually doing things with instruments they won't let me touch and things like that. He would like to be able to do, he looked at Conference XP and wanted to know if he could have his own venue and such, and we set that up so he could work with the lab techs using multiple cameras in the wet lab, so that he doesn't have to go running, you know, a quarter mile across campus to help his lab techs, etc., or for them to communicate with him. And this, Jason, is where I stumbled over this gnat problem. So this notion of doing the collaboration and supervision, David States would like to not have to spend so much time walking. And so he likes that for this. Persistent presence is another way to address this. Is we have the folks at the bioinformatics and life sciences area. They do have a lot of their staff and a lot of their computational equipment out on what we call North Campus, which is only a 5-mile drive when you need to go out there. This notion but there are folks at each end that go to the same place and have lunch every day, for example. And the picture that Mike showed about the big screens in Phoenix. What if you could take Conference XP and hang a plasma display on the wall, and you just left it in this venue all the time? Maybe it's at the water cooler where Dr. Athey could go up and get his coffee or water, or it's the room that the folks hang out and have lunch in, and the folks at the other building are having lunch there as well, where you could sit and have this dialogue and be able to talk. Or if you want to talk, maybe in IM, you just say IMC at the water cooler, and you go there and you have a face-to-face meeting. Very casual, but there's always a place where you go and it's always going to be there, always going to be on. And that's a big deal to these, to the doctors, to the medical folks, is they want that nonverbal feedback that they don't find IM or even email satisfactory for some of the things they're doing. Telemicroscopy. There are two areas on campus. We have one fellow who works in material sciences by the name of John Mansfield that his problem is he has these scanning electron microscopes, and you can fit maybe 3 or 4 students in the room with the microscope if 2 of them don't care that they can't see anything that's going on there. John has, over the years I've worked with him, has cobbled together things using things like VNC, and he's put video splitters on the back of it and such. The reason he's done that is because he has students he's teaching in material sciences where he has them up in a classroom that's 3 stories above where the microscope is, and wants them to understand how to use the microscope, the different things it can do, and to see the results of the image that comes off the SEM. He doesn't have the time or the means to get all 100 students down there the number of times they need to for the semester. So I was visiting with him last month and was showing him things like Conference XP. Most of these scanning electron microscopes have PCs on them. And guess what operating system they're running?
Linux.
No, Windows. Most of them are running Windows systems. So to put Conference XP on there and to, with just some small jumper cable or just system configuration, suddenly the video image that normally appears on the second computer monitor shows up in his classroom, being projected on the wall. Using the remote desktop control, he can actually drive the microscope or manipulate it from there. So he's able he's interested in Conference XP as a way of extending the classroom in a more secure manner. The other thing that we're looking at is the medical school has this department whose whole job is to take care of these microscopes. Some of them are the scanning electron microscopes. Some of them are just focal lenses. And it turns out there are people in the Midwest that drive from places like Buffalo, New York, or from different places in Indiana or Ohio to come and bring their samples to use on these microscopes. Some of the microscopes are where they actually set up the slide, the item in there. It'll take a picture and slightly move the image a little bit, take another picture, and their goal is to get all of this back. These guys would like not to have to drive from Buffalo. The folks that run this area with all these microscopes, there's money involved. They would like to make these more available. And so we're currently working with them, the notion where they could mail in their samples, set it up, and imagine if you could get on from home over your cable modem and take a look at an image and find out that the 8-hour run that you're going to have, something's gone wrong, there's no sense continuing it, you don't want to pay for it, and so you just stop it at that point. The operator back at the lab full of microscopes loads up the next guy's image, and off he goes to the races. So it's to allow remote access to the lab to researchers that need to use the microscopes, as well as extending the microscopes into the classroom. and these are areas, the visual quality of Conference XP exceeds expectations most of the time. And there's some things that, you know, you better get the HD video. But for most instances that are listed here, Conference XP is readily available. It's easy to implement. And particularly being able to share the images across multiple endpoints matters. So
That's a lot of bullets.
that's a lot of bullets. Well, my next slide. So that's it. So if you have experience or interest in how these sort of tools are used in the medical community, or how you are using them in the medical community, I'm interested in knowing more about that. And if you really want to go on break and get one of those good brownies, that would be my suggestion at this point. But makes sense? Questions? Ivan will be happy to answer them all.
Sorry. I'm working with a couple of people in the medical area, and actually they don't want to use anything I suggest unless it's well encrypted and authentication is being used. How do you look at that? How do the people you're in touch with respond to that? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, there are folks that are concerned about the issues related to privacy and authentication, sort of authorization. There are a couple of things doing with that. One is I've been talking to Todd and to Jason about this, and I actually have this notion that having a shared key. Now, if you go talk to the cryptologist, they'll go, oh, that's easy. But I want to tell you that shared key is sufficient for most things that are being done today. And in fact, it's what has been used in the access grid for encrypted conferences for a number of years, and it's actually what's used for most of the VPN stuff that's going on is either a generated or a shared key. Another area that interested in looking at is be nice if on Conference XP or any of these tools that you had the capability for a plug-in for something, I guess similar to some of the web space on campuses in the US, things like Cosign or WebAuth, where you can use whatever your local authentication service is, and then even use something like your local authorization service, like an LDAP directory server or so. A couple of things that tend to happen on a medical campus. The reason this the privacy isn't of a great concern on a medical campus is currently to get access to any production services on a medical campus, you have to have a VPN connection. So the encryption and the privacy is taken care of at the network connection layer. That's the good news. The bad news is that the authentication and the privacy is taken care of at the network layer. So, you know, and so there are some performance trade-offs, particularly for UDP, the packet forwarding. So the VPNs on the medical campus, it's a problem, but it's not as great a problem as one might think, at least at the University of Michigan, because I've got to tell you, you've got to have a VPN if you want to use the Meeting Maker calendar system from home, you know, which isn't a problem for me.
Because you don't want to use it, or?
I'm going to take the microphone off and then tell you, do you guys have these group calendars? Everybody has these group calendars. I want to tell you what the assumption that almost 20 years ago happened to me at U of M. Is if somebody wanted to propose a meeting and I didn't have something in that slot on my calendar, they assumed that time was theirs. So I didn't use meeting, I refused to use the application at all because I would get phone calls saying, you're not at this meeting. And I would say, well, I never said I would come to that meeting. Well, you didn't decline. And I said, but I didn't accept. And so, you know, there was sort of this inverse psychology going on But after a while, folks like Lori learned that I never used the application. If they really wanted me to come, they'd send me email, to which I would reply. So I'm a bad boy.
You have to train your audience. I agree. You have to train your audience.
You know.
I get all sorts of that too, and I just say the same thing you do. If you didn't hear from me, assume I'm not coming.
Well, that works good unless the person that's using, I'm actually using it now because my boss, if he sees that slot's open, he figures all the time is his. So I do glance at it once in a while just to see if there's a TED request, you know.
But have you taken the defensive posture yet? Which is to just schedule all.
Log out, that's what we do. Yes.
Well, and that's what Ted does with all his extra time. It always says private, and I say, well, what are you doing then? He said, well, I don't want anybody to schedule meetings. And so there's this terrible thing that's happened that if you don't decline, it's presumed that you've agreed. But that's not true anywhere else in life, you know. That if you don't do this, they assume you're doing this. So.
Cell phone here.
And those brownies sound better all the time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks.